Shalom again from Interfaithfulness, where we're building bridges, where history builds walls. Today we're going to be continuing to look at the 6 C's of faith sharing, and we want to look at communal suitability. We want to see if the congregations that we form are places that are suitable for serving God's purposes for the Messianic movement. So let's look here at what God's purpose for the Messianic movement is. This is my suggestion. God's purpose for the Messianic movement is that we be a sign, a demonstration, and a catalyst of his consummating purposes for the descendants of Jacob. The Messianic movement is supposed to be a servant movement, serving God's purposes for the Jewish people, to be a sign, a demonstration, and a catalyst of that purpose. And we need to evaluate our congregations to see if they're a bridge to that purpose or an obstacle. That's an important question. Another presupposition we need to deal with is this, that in our congregations, Jewish people should feel like they're coming home rather than leaving home or being honored visitors in someone else's world. Ideally, even Jewish people who don't normally go to synagogue haven't been to synagogue in decades. Our goal is that when they come to one of our places, one of our synagogues, they would say, this feels like home. This is Jewish space. I like this. But do they instead feel like they're strangers in a strange land? In many cases, that's true. No matter how hospitable you feel, we send signals to people that this is not like any synagogue they've ever known, and it doesn't feel right. And we'll be looking at some of that a little more. We don't want Jewish people to feel like they're honored guests in somebody else's world. We want them to look at Yeshua faith as their world. So, here's a text that I think is good to keep in mind from Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 30. Ezekiel says that God says this, I sought for a man or a woman among them who should build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. Building up a wall is designed to keep certain threatening things out. We need to ask ourselves, what is it that we need to keep out of the Messianic Jewish movement? What is a hindrance to our serving God's purpose? And as far as standing in the breach, that, I believe, pertains to prayer. We should, like Abraham, stand in the presence of God, praying for certain things to happen for the Jewish people in the environs of the Messianic movement. So what should we be standing against, and what should we be standing for in order to have congregations that are suited to our responsibility for the Jewish people? These are questions to bear in mind, and they're questions that are very important to me, and I hope will be important to you. So, now, we're going to look today at about 5 currently extant models of services that you find in and around the Messianic movement. Before I get to them, let me say this. People in the Messianic movement who have these congregations have worked very, very hard. Nobody's getting rich out of one of these congregations, trust me. They work hard for small remuneration, and they deserve to be respected and honored. But the question I'm going to ask today is, how well suited are some of these models to serving God's purpose for the Jewish people? That's an important question. So here's that first model, what I call Jimmy Swaggart with yarmulkes. There are some of our congregations which, if you just step back a little bit, you'll realize that what you have there basically is American Pentecostal or charismatic culture with a yarmulke and a tallis and maybe a spritz of chicken soup. You don't have really Jewish space. Jewish people will come to that and they'll say, that's interesting, but it doesn't feel like a synagogue. Now, I'm not talking about Jewish people who have been bouncing around from different church cultures, for a number of years, who are well socialized in Christian space. I'm talking about Jewish people who are just taking a first look at Yeshua. Is there a place that they can feel at home among us? I would suggest that Jimmy Swaggart with yarmulkes may not be the best way to do things. You'll have to make your own judgment. I'm not here to think for you. I'm just going to here to tell you how I think. Here's number two. Two houses congregations are congregations that believe that Gentiles who feel attracted to Messianic Judaism are really part of the lost tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. This is really the resurrection of a viewpoint known as British Israelism, where people believe that Great Britain and the British Isles are really Jewish tribes. Well, this has been discredited by people much brighter than any of us right here. And despite the fact that people in these movements write thick papers with a lot of Bible verses sprinkled in, it's really not a true viewpoint. But let's suppose, for your sake, that you believe it is true. The question I have is, do normal Jewish people, your doctors, your lawyers, your professors, the Jewish people you might meet in the supermarket, in the business world, are they going to find such a place like home, or are they going to find it interesting, but frankly, a little bit strange? It's an important question to ask and answer, and I ask it all the time. Let's look at number three. Number three is holy name or sacred name groups. These also exist on the periphery of the Messianic movement, but their assumptions have trickled in. I've seen those assumptions, tendrils of those assumptions, deeper into the movement. This is the idea that if you really want to get things right and have power with God, you need to learn to say God's name out loud. That the rabbis have no right to tell us that we shouldn't speak God's sacred name, that the Tetragrammaton, which I am not going to pronounce now, the four-letter name of God, should be pronounced loud and clear. And Yeshua is not just Yeshua. He should be called Yahushua or other mangled words that come from people whose only knowledge of Hebrew comes from the concordance at the back from the appendix at the end of a concordance. People who don't know anything about Hebrew grammar and who mean well, but it's really very strange. Frankly, it is. It's like learning Spanish from bottles of salsa. It's not where you learn Spanish. So I remember being a guest at a church in New York City where they were sacred name people. And the pastor's wife, who was a very bright woman, said she never knew such power with God until she started using the holy name. Well, that's superstition. Jewish people will recognize it as superstition. And they're not liable to return to such a place. So let's not create such a place, please. Number four. Number four is Arthur Murray Goes to Tel Aviv. I'm not against dancing, by the way. I've written a lot of Messianic music, and people have been dancing to my music for 40 years and more. I'm not against dancing, but I am against having a congregation where the only claim to being Jewish space is that there's a lot of Jewish-style dancing, but the service otherwise feels like Jimmy Swagger with yarmulkes or feels like something else. An authentic synagogue does not become authentic by having Jewish dancing, because, ladies and gentlemen, in mainstream synagogues, for the most part, Jewish people don't dance, except on Simchat Torah, the celebration of the giving of the law. So dancing is not what makes Jewish services Jewish, and it's not going to make our services Jewish either. So if your congregation, if its main claim to being Jewish space is a lot of dancing, well, God bless you. The dancing is nice, but it's not going to get the job done. There needs to be more going on than that. Now we come to the fifth example, and this is the one I'll be through with for today. I've got 5 more tomorrow. Mulligan Stew. This is a congregation where they throw in anything Jewish happens to be laying around. You got an Israeli flag or two. You have tambourines shaped like Mogen Davids, like Jewish stars. You have tzitzit, you have taluses, you have yarmulkes. You have a few candles thrown in, a couple of blessings thrown in, people blowing shofars whenever they're excited. Anything Jewish that you happen to find lying around, you throw into the pot. But there's no Jewish structure to the service. There's no affinity for the way Jewish people do things. By the way, Jewish people don't blow shofars when they're excited. Shofars are only blown during the high holy days. And it's a very holy object. And just because you have a Bible verse for it doesn't make it Jewish space to Jewish people. So mulligan stew is not going to get the job done either. So I want you to think about these things and think again about what I shared with you from the prophet Ezekiel, that God is looking for people to build walls to protect this movement, and he's looking for people to stand in the gap and pray to him for the things that should grow. What things should be kept out and what things should grow? These are crucial questions for our movement. And next time, which will probably be tomorrow, I'll share with you the rest of this list, and hopefully it's helping you to think more clearly about our responsibility in the Messianic Jewish movement. So bye-bye for now from Interfaithfulness, where we are building bridges, where history builds walls. Shalom.